Hello, and welcome to the future of blockchain gaming from CoinDesk and QuickNode. My name is Jeff Wilser. I'm a writer for CoinDesk and host of the AI-focused podcast, AI Curious. We have a juicy webinar today. This is one of my favorite topics in all of crypto and Web3. I'm a crypto nerd. I'm a gaming nerd. So this is some serious chocolate and peanut butter action today. And I'm joined by an all-star panel. We have Adam Fern, product lead at Proof of Play, Josh Neuroth, VP of products at QuickNode, and James Burney, who is heroically joining us from Australia at 2 a.m., group product manager at Immutable. Let's start by hearing some quick intros from our panelists. Josh, kick us off, sir.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Well, hey, everyone. I've been in the Web3 space for about 4 years working on infra, and I love the infra space because reliable, fast-performing infra is what every company requires. At QuickNode, we serve pretty much every use case in crypto, from exchanges to NFT marketplace to the GameFi space. And we also support more than 20 chains. So it's really interesting perspective of what's happening on the dev side, where's utility being created, what's growing over time. So happy to talk about that today and be here.
Awesome. Adam.
Hey everyone, Adam, product lead at Proof of Play. I joined Proof of Play almost 2 years ago now, coming from a lot of startups, primarily in the fintech space. Once I got red pilled on crypto, I realized I had to jump in and teamed up with Amit and a bunch of other amazing people on the founding team to build Proof of Play, which is both a game studio and a technology company, because we believe that infrastructure alone isn't going to propel the industry forward. We have to also build a killer app, which is our game called Pirate Nation.
Awesome. And more proof that Web3 is decentralized, global, around the globe at all hours of the nights. James, 2 a.m., please. How are you, sir?
The sun should never set on crypto, as evidenced by being 2 a.m. here. Hello, so my name is James Burney. I look after our core blockchain team at Immutable. So it's the team building out the new Immutable ZK AVM. And just for context, in case you're not familiar with Immutable, what we do is we're a one-stop shop for everything you need in order to build a video game. So if you're a gaming studio, we try to, as we say, make building Web3 games on easy mode when you're building with Immutable. Everything you need, just one stop shop, nicely integrated together.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. So to kind of ease us into this world for a lay of the land, I believe Josh has some quick slides to share here.
So gaming industry stats. So how big is the space? I was looking at it kind of just the game industry in general has exploded in recent years. I've read estimates that it's now bigger than even the movie industry. It's now, considered, and with the streaming and all that, it's almost like on the level, if not surpassed, of professional sports. And then blockchain gaming is still just a very, very small fraction of that. So if we think about, total GameFi space is, or the gaming industry in general is over 250 billion a year, then the blockchains we're like less than 3% on the blockchain side. And what I love about this is that we've gone to 3% in literally 4 years. No one was really doing games on blockchain 4 years ago. This is all just a brand new space, and it's growing very, very fast, especially in the globe. Southeast Asia, we're going to talk about that in a few minutes here, in Europe. And so, you on this panel today, we got some of the best perspectives of core builders that are building games, like on the Proof of Play side, building platforms for GameFi companies. On the Immutable side, and then QuickNode, we support a lot of the games that come in, and you just need to kind of scale their infra to the next level. So, excited to talk about that. But I see a ton of just developers coming into the QuickNode platform trying to figure out their strategy for GameFi. And there's a lot of reasons I think that they're doing that. Jeff, you want to see, or before I move on, anyone else want to contribute? What are your thoughts on kind of the game industry stats?
Well, I think
Oh,
it's a,
sorry,
I,
Jeff.
I think it's a, no, I think it's a really important perspective that like we're all kind of focused here on Web3, but the overall pie is so much freaking bigger. And that really does give a sense of, okay, wow, what's the potential? And I think I've been covering crypto for a long time. And this is every analyst I've spoken to in the past couple of years are like, ding, 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 like this truly could be a breakout use case in the coming year or two for Web3. And I think we'll kind of dive into why that's the case, what is the potential. So I think it's a really good kind of high level perspective. I love now to dive into like, it's gonna sound like a dumb and obvious question, but like why blockchain gaming in the first place, right? To your point, Josh, we have like nearly 8 billion in to begin with, and forgetting about Web3. So what problem is Web3 solving? Why are we all here today? What are we doing? What's the point? What's it used for? And I think you had next slide on that one. And then let's start with you, James. What do you say to the skeptics who are like, what the hell are we even talking about? Why do we need crypto for games? What is this kind of unlock, and what use cases are now here we didn't have in traditional gaming?
Yeah. So the two main things we always talk about are the first point is the first thing we always talk about is the second bullet point on this slide, that the true ownership or digital ownership of in-game assets is incredibly powerful, like from both points of view. And by both points of view, I mean the end user, you're getting complete control over, your assets that you bought in game. They're now no longer reflected just within like a single arbitrary unit, like they're on a distributed ledger that you have complete control over. The second, point of view that's also good for is the game studios, that we are seeing increased retention when users have digital ownership, because they have more, so that's good from a monetary point of view for the game studios. And then the second thing that we talk about is this is generally good for the for the world in general. Not to go too manifesto on this, but this is an opportunity. The Web3 industry in general is an opportunity to bring on that first billion users onto blockchain technology. And the gaming is such a great like lever arm, or like Trojan horse, if you will, to like start to upgrade the software and the backbone that humanity is used to using. Those are the two main points that we normally talk about.
Awesome. Adam, how about you? What's your kind of reaction to skeptics?
I think that we're all gluttons for punishment, which is why we're here. I think that crypto generally attracts people on the fringes of just wanting to try out new technologies. And, we at Proof of Play would be the first to admit, like, we don't know if games should be built on chain. We think they should, and we want to push it as far as possible. And so that's why our ethos is build everything fully on chain, see where it breaks, see what the constraints will yield in terms of interesting game design decisions. And we just want to see like what can be done here. And we know we're very early in terms of like the infrastructure required to make this work and the game design pieces. A lot of games that you play now, like the game design pieces are obvious, like a loot box or a gotcha, like those were invented at some point and then they became industry standard. And we're hoping to find like what are those industry standards that we can build on blockchain gaming. For us, the things that we really, if I were to point out two things that we care about, it's extensibility. And so like UGC, early games and even games now, UGC is a core component, but it's not that easy to develop on-chain game or off-chain games like and mod them. Like what we believe is that with the tooling that we're developing right now, in the future, it will be easier to build on-chain games than off-chain games because the server's already in place. All you have to do is, build a mod, pop it onto, like onto the chain that's already running. You don't have to think about servers or infrastructure or anything like that. And so like we're really excited about encouraging UGC and people to just build into the Pirate Nation universe or any other games that we build in the future. We want to be, the leading example of that. And the other piece is permanence. So our CEO, Amit, was one of the, co-founders of Farmville, obviously extremely popular and foundational game, brought in the social era. And the game got shut down a couple years ago because, there was no support for Flash and like there was billions of hours of human creativity, time, money spent, and then just went poof, right? The devs rugged it. And so we want to build a game that is unruggable. if the team at Proof of Play and Pirate Nation decide, we don't want to work on this anymore, or it's not working, but the community decides actually there's something here, we want to continue it. Right now, the game runs on chain. Like the full logic of the game is on chain. We don't have any control over it in that sense, and so it can just continue without us. And that's a really powerful idea. This idea of like a forever game. And it doesn't mean that in 50 years from now people will be playing Pirate Nation. I mean, if it is, we've succeeded beyond our wildest expectations. But the fact that it's possible is something that we're aspiring towards. And it's something that's really interesting that previously hasn't been possible.
I love that phrase, building game that's unruggable. I'm going to see that in a billboard somewhere. And Josh, your thoughts, sir?
Yeah. I always think about kind of like the Blu-ray DVD space or even the VHS, like my father-in-law is a DVD collector. He's probably like 30,000 DVDs now.
What?
And yeah, it's crazy amount. But for him, he loves movies. Like movies are his thing. It's his hobby to watch movies, to have like a home theater, to own these like copies of these movies that he, bought. And if you think about the GameFi, they're just the gaming space, that really isn't the case. Like if you spend hundreds of hours in a game, building your character, collecting in-game items. If that company goes out of business or they shut down or they decide they don't want to support this game anymore, in many cases you're out of luck, right? You don't have anything to show for that because they control that. So I think, what Adam just said here is like building the game that can kind of live on with the players, with that work that they put in, like where they have that true ownership, like that is a really powerful concept. And I also love this perspective that like we are still figuring this out. And in many cases, this isn't to necessarily replace like the entire gaming industry. It's to provide an alternative way of building that is fair and meaningful to the gamers and the players in the space. And so I don't think that this has to replace, like kind of like the games that we all know and love, but it is a very powerful alternative to what is there today. And one of the things I think about too is why blockchain gaming is actually not necessarily on the player side, but it's on the more entrepreneurial side. We saw on the previous slide that, since 2018, 19 billion has been invested in blockchain gaming. And if you think about it today, like if you're trying to build a game studio or a game and you want capital, like in many cases, you're competing with like much better funded game studios. It can be hard to raise depending on where you're at in the world. And blockchain gaming has really opened the doors to raise funds from anywhere and even raise funds directly from the gaming community. And so maybe we'll go to the next slide and look at kind of like this coverage of like where is Web3 gaming, where's blockchain, happening. And I love to see that 40% of kind of the activity is in Southeast Asia, literally the world's largest population center. So that's incredible.
Yeah,
Josh.
absolutely. And just real quick, I think that one thing I'm going to notice you mentioned that is an alternative, and I think one thing we'll see later in the conversation is it could be an alternative, but it might not be either or. There might be, I think it's one thing that's really cool we'll get into is how a lot of like Web2 games are actually embracing Web3. So it's not like Web2 or Web3, it's a little of both. So I think we'll get into that. And I'm so glad that you brought up the global perspective, Josh, because yeah, it is global. One reason there's so much excitement is how big this pie could be. There are billions, literally billions of people playing games all around the world. So what are you guys seeing from different regional perspectives? How what's hot in one area might not be what's in the US or vice versa? Adam, what are you seeing, sir?
Yeah, just talking about the demographics from Pirate Nation, we're roughly split. 60% of our customer base is in the US, and then the remaining 40 is between like 10% Europe, and then the rest is like China, Vietnam, Southeast Asia region. Which I think you see a lot of in like play to earn gaming in particular. We saw that with Axie. A lot of their players were focused in the Southeast Asia region. We haven't quite, like our population hasn't flipped because we are very openly not play to earn. Like we're not encouraging those game mechanics. Like we're not anti it. It's just like not the game that we're building. And so those games tend to attract a certain type of audience. And so it's possible we're not seeing those people because like the incentive design of our game isn't there. I just wanted to also comment on what Josh was saying earlier about replacement or, you know, when I talk to skeptics about blockchain gaming, I want to tell them like, we're not coming for your PC, we're not coming for your console. This is just another game mode that some people might want to engage with. And we see that people engage with economy type games where, they're selling items they earn in game, like on some marketplace, and it's against the TOS, and they get, their accounts closed down. It's like a whole drama. We know that people want to do this. Like, why not enable it? Why make it against the rules? Why not just make it part of the game itself? And if people want to engage in this game mode, that's fine. You also don't have to. Like, it's not the only way to play a game. There's not one right way to play many of these games, especially if they're open economy games. And so we're just providing another alternative and a way for people to engage with the game. But we're not trying to, replace the current industry, just building new game modes. The way that mobile was a new way to play, social games are a new way to play, consoles, etc. We just want to be another vertical for people to engage with.
Totally. And James, how about you? What are you seeing as far as regional trends and insights and differences?
What we see is pretty reflective in this chart. Like first, it's worldwide, like you mentioned up front, Jeff. Like it's a huge addressable market, a huge pie that everybody has access to. The second point is Southeast Asia has been absolutely massive, especially in the last 2 years. The effects that like the SEC has had in the US has had a little bit of a chilling effect. And the nice thing has been that Southeast Asia has like more than picked up the slack in the last couple of years in terms of like game studio interest going into Web3. The North America, like definitely there's a lot of interest there, but it is a little just because the regulatory environment, like a little less risk taking. But we do have plenty of game studios working with us that are spread between North America, EMEA, and APAC. And we don't have, I don't think we have a single major game studio in South America. I would love to get more of them South America, but it's pretty reflective of this distribution.
We have a sizable population in Brazil now that you mention it. I'm not sure where they came from, but they're like extremely loyal. They've hosted their first meetup a couple of weeks ago, and they're like really, there's a lot of Brazilian streamers apparently, and they seem to love the game. So I left those out. Sorry, South America.
No, and actually, this is essentially, Adam mentioned that Brazilian streamers on this webinar, and anyone, feel free to chime in with questions. This is interactive, so feel free to chime in with questions, and we'll get you. Also, no intention for erasing Brazilian gaming culture here. Josh, what else are you seeing, sir, on your end? Any global trends, global insights?
Yeah, well, I see people building games all over the world, and a lot of indie game developers. I saw someone in like Nepal the other day, which I don't think I've ever seen a game studio in Nepal. So that is truly amazing. And just being able to kind of blockchain gaming just lowers the barrier to entry, which is just a principle in general I love. So that's encouraging that we're all in this together, that we truly have this technology that's kind of enabled this, and we're so early now that I think over the next couple of years we'll figure out kind of best practices, but really exciting space.
Awesome. And Josh, to your point, it is so early. I know it's a kind of we hear that a lot in the crypto space. Oh, we're early, we're in the first inning, all that stuff. But in this case, it really is true. And I'd love now to pivot to what I call kind of some real talk segment, right? The real talk is that, as Josh's first slide showed, it is only Web3 gaming is only 3% of this huge pie. So let's get into why is that? Why, while there's tremendous progress, all kinds of excitement happening around the world, which is really cool, it's also true, in my perspective at least, it hasn't truly gone mainstream to the extent that my neighbor down the street who doesn't really care about crypto is playing a Web3 game, right? So let's get into why that is. What are the reasons and pain points that blockchain gaming hasn't truly kind of hit the normies yet? And I'm guessing a key part of that is a fun word that Josh used. If you guys caught it, infra. I'm not cool enough to pull off that jargon, but infra or infrastructure. Let's talk about infra and infrastructure. And I'm guessing that's a key part of why things haven't yet truly exploded. Josh, as you use that word that I'm not cool enough to use, infra, why don't you start us off here?
Yeah, so definitely I think we have to talk about kind of the journey of this tech. To me, blockchain represents a new paradigm, just building applications in general. that's kind of a topic for another time, but effectively, instead of a centralized database, you build your application on chain, and you're effectively writing transactions, you're writing information to an open, accessible blockchain that anyone can see. And so, typically, like I think if you think about the space, we've had these public blockchains that have been out there, for example, Ethereum, Avalanche, Binance Smart Chain. And depending on the chain, you have varying degrees of fees that a user has to pay to facilitate a transaction, being gas fees. And so, Ethereum, those fees have ranged from, a couple dollars to $100. And then with other chains, they've kind of fluctuated, been cheaper. But ultimately, if you're thinking about like the scale of a game, if in a former role I was at, I worked with the Roblox team on their data center and network, and during 2020, they March 2020, kind of when the world shut down, they hit 1 million players, and in just like one day. And to have that many players playing a game at once, you're thinking about that. That's like literally like billions of read writes, billions of transactions that are happening, but with assets and things being created in the game. And there's like blockchain just can't handle that today. And so I think the group here on this call, we're trying to solve that problem. We're trying to make this technology to the scale where it really could facilitate 1 billion users globally, right? And that's a journey in process today. And so, I think, on the slide here, we have this is a little bit about what we talk about at QuickNode. We talk about kind of the rise of custom chains, meaning like we still have Ethereum out there, we still have Avalanche, we still have Binance Smart Chain, and these public chains are great. They've kind of become almost like settlements layers, but then we're seeing game studios want to be able to control that experience where there's not these fees for transactions, or it's either low fees or no fees at all. And so, like Immutable has a great solution for this where they have kind of like a gasless service that you can build. Love to hear Proof of Play's perspective on this as well. But generally, I think, what's happening in the space is that the games are moving to kind of these custom chains. So at QuickNode, you can work with us. We will help you launch that chain, everything you need from the core infra to the block explorer to some of the connections. But then our partners like Immutable and Proof of Play of the world, they've already built like tech that makes that way easier to do. And these are kind of these app specific chains that I think we've used in the industry to date.
And as part of James, maybe you could help me out with, and thanks, that was
Yeah.
an awesome overview, Josh. James, maybe you can help me out with something, is just to kind of like bring this, like a very hyper concrete, possibly dumb example, but from a layperson here, Josh mentioned the issue of scaling. Is one of the issues too about latency. I'm just imagining like, okay, let's play. Imagine I'm playing some game with like, I have a sword and my character is trying to cut off the head of a goblin, right? Like I'm nerding, full nerd out mode. Like it's one thing in traditional blockchain, if I'm sending someone Ethereum or Bitcoin, cool, we can take 10 seconds for that transaction, no big deal. I'm not going to lose my shirt over 10 seconds. But if I'm swinging a sword of the goblin, it takes 10 seconds, it's unplayable. So it's part of the issue that games by definition have like demands of like hyper fast things happening all the time. And then talk a little more about what are the unique reasons that games need additional infrastructure kind of speed and support that other parts of the Web3 ecosystem don't really have to deal with.
Yeah, sure. The great question, Jeff. So, I think most of us here have played like at least one video game ever. Yes, they can relate to that example that you're giving. Yeah, you absolutely have to have it's unacceptable. Like a Web3 will not be successful if finality on blockchain takes 10 minutes, like it takes on most L1s. And by finality I mean that like the state is finalized. That the transaction between you pick something up off the ground and it's now part of your character, which is say that sword in your example, Jeff. That needs to happen in certainly less than 2 seconds, probably less than 1 second over the long term. But once you get down to less than 2 seconds, that's the point where the game can gloss over things. To your point, if it gets up to 10 seconds, you're just going to see people bailing out of that game, and that's not good. The other thing too is, in addition to the finality, Josh, you mentioned this. we can't be exposing the concept of gas to users.
Hmm.
It's like the equivalent of, like, say you're trying to buy something on Amazon, and in addition to buying something, you have to add this extra tax, which is Amazon's like AWS bill, and that AWS bill is paid in a completely different currency that you've never heard of. Like, we can't add that into a video game. Like, that will not work. From a funnel hacking point of view, you'll have
Right.
your normal funnel and you'll have this really steep drop. So we have to make sure that just does not happen. And then the third point, to Josh's point about like app chains, is like for the really hunk and large games, like we, for most chains, it's going to be totally fine for them to quote share a database, meaning share a single blockchain. But for the ones that are either absolutely massive traffic, or if they're doing something similar to what proof of play is doing and like writing everything to the chain, which means your reads and writes are really frequent, you can't be sharing the database, quote unquote. Those are the three like big hurdles I think we really have to get over in order for Web3 gaming to start to take off, and
Yeah,
meaning
I
for it to
can
be pragmatic for user point of view.
I can tell you a horror story about that. When we were on Polygon, there was a game called Planet Nine that launched, or XI, or IX, whatever. It's unclear what it was actually called. And it was a game that was like effectively run by bots. The Polygon prices were going up. Oh, I should add before I go into this anecdote that proof of play pays for all the gas in Pirate Nation, because from day one we realized it was extremely important not to expose any of the guts of the blockchain to the players. And we strive to make the game as seamless and as Web 2 feeling as possible. So when you click into the game, you never see your MetaMask wallet after the first time you log into the game. You click a button, it immediately writes it to the chain. You don't have to fuddle around with your MetaMask or whatever wallet you're using. You don't have to think about gas. You don't have to worry about what you're even doing other than just playing the game. And we've gotten our writes down to like under 2 seconds on Arbitrum Nova. We're using our own in-house VRF that we've built. Like basically we built all our own infra, like from the gas list to the VRF to the signless gasless transactions, like all that we built in-house, because we realized as part of being a fun game studio, we also need to build the infra required to enable the game to feel real. So back to the anecdote. We were on Polygon and this game went live, and the gas went from 30, 40 Gwei to 700-800 on average 24 hours a day, because it was bots. So our fees went from like 1 to 3 cents per, which is like not cheap but not a big deal, to over $1 per transaction. And we were spending like 6 or 7 grand a day in gas fees to run this game for a couple hundred people, right? We weren't where we are now in terms of like our DAUs. So we were like, there was like 250 players or 300 players maybe at most, and 6K per day. And we're making no revenue, of course. So this was just like throwing money in the trash. And Matic token was like spiking. So we were just getting crushed on both sides. And we had that realization for the first time. I was like, we got to go. And that's when we ended up, pivoting the game to Arbitrum Nova, where, the finality is super quick, under 2 seconds. Gas fees are one cent per. And, we've been very happy there. But we felt the pain of the tragedy of the commons, like very, very, and it was like out of our control, right? This game, I have no idea if it still exists or not, if it's still popular, but it was like there was a way to extract money from that game. It was very much a play to earn game, and people wrote bots in order to extract funds, and like we were, the and we were the byproduct, and it caused us to make a massive, massive infrastructure change. And so when you think about like what's happening here, like infrastructure is at the core of our ability to scale our game, and also the ability of us to deliver a fun experience. It was also slowing our game down, because our relayer at the time, it wasn't built in-house, and it didn't know how to handle the increased volume. And so it was taking 10 seconds, 20 seconds to confirm a transaction, which just made the game like extremely unfun and expensive. And so that was our first lesson in shared infrastructure tragedy of the commons issues. We haven't had that
But
issue.
it gave us a lovely anecdote to very concretely show that the perils of not using something like an app chain to kind of speed and scale things. Anything else you want to say, Josh, on app chains and their
Yeah,
importance
I
that we
mean,
covered yet?
yeah, I think I think to Adam's point, this is very much like we're all trying to figure out how to make this experience better, and we're still very early in that. So, we've used these kind of layer twos or these side chains like Polygon, and now we're almost into this like app chain world where we need this concept of dedicated block space for that game. And so you have kind of like two different approaches, I think, in the GameFi space today. You can deploy to these layer twos like Arbitrum, or do an app specific chain on Arbitrum Nova, or some other I've seen chains like games go onto like the Avalanche subnets before. And so we're kind of inventing the future to make these things a reality. And so I do have a slide on this just to talk through this. I think just generally you need dedicated block space for a game or game studio. Now, not everyone at the space we're at needs this right now, but I think that's where we're going. Ultimately, if you're building a game, you want to control that experience. That's the theme we're seeing across all these different use cases. And in some cases, that means not, just sponsoring the gas yourself. But I think long term, we're going into this world where with the app chains, you can actually capture some of that gas yourself as a new revenue stream as you get to scale. And so that's like one thing that I'm seeing from the conversations that QuickNode is in is, games come to us and they're like, how do we, our users are paying gas in many cases. How do we capture that gas? And so that's kind of driving some of these games into the app chains where they can run their own sequencer, they capture those gas fees from their community, and that becomes a revenue stream for them. So, and this is not the only way, certainly you can just build on a layer two. Immutable has their own chain now. I'd love to hear James talk a little bit about their tech and kind of what they're seeing on their side.
Yeah, James, what are you guys seeing with your chain action?
So Immutable's built two chains so far from the ground up. We had our chain that's been in production for 2+ years. That's built on top of StarkX, and then we have our new one that just launched on this Monday. So it's, the mainnet's actually Genesis about a month and a half ago, but we opened it up for early access on Monday. The traction we've had with the new chain, which is a zero knowledge EVM, so ZK EVM, the traction we've had from that with the game studios has been so strong. Ever since we announced it last year at GDC, we have over 100+ games that are actively building on that. Being the combination of EVM compatible, the zero knowledge rollups, and then seeing really strong response there. And then there are also a handful of customers that need to have, as Josh has pointed out, the dedicated block space, either because high number of transactions per game, or high number of users, or some combination thereof. And that's why we have our third option of having dedicated ZK VMs that we also offer for customers. Across the board, it's really strong. Like the reaction we're seeing, like there's a really nice set of tailwinds.
Awesome.
Behind.
No, that's awesome. Congrats. And I think it's a good segue to one thing you mentioned earlier off camera was that one thing you guys are seeing is that it's not just the excitement of what's happening on chain in the Web3 community. It's a big part of it. But there's also a story, and I'd like to kind of abstract this up a little bit again, of Web2 traditional gaming companies poking around and being curious about injecting Web3 use cases. What are you guys seeing there? So it's not just about, okay, there's traditional gaming, old stodgy boomer games, then Web3 games. We're starting to see some mixtures. James, what are you guys seeing of like Web2 companies saying, that's interesting. Can we do a little bit of this?
Yeah, there's an awful lot of that. I call it dabbling, but dabbling where they're committed to doing a huge launch coming up. The 2:30 in the morning caught up to me for a second there. No, it's the sorry, I lost my train of thought.
Web2 companies, Web2 games are like, what can we embrace? What are you guys doing well in Web3 that we never even thought of, and we want to incorporate this cool tip, this cool trick?
Yeah, makes sense. So there's three use cases we see people going after. I mean, game studios being super keen on right now. So one, you have your primary sales. That's a easy like revenue generation engine. And when you add in digital ownership, primary sales itself is not new to gaming, but when you add in digital ownership, you're seeing higher average revenue per user, and also you're seeing that retention up boost. Which retention is everything when it comes to video games. The second is a use case we call crafting. So use case of like, take for example, say you're playing like a mech game, and you're say Josh is walking around in his mech, and he notices that unfortunately Adam's mech had previously been died for whatever reason. Josh is able to salvage, say, a rocket launcher off of Adam's mech, and when he does that, those two things are represented as 721s on chain, ERC 721s. And there's this action called crafting, where we're basically slamming two NFTs together and doing that upgrade. The representing that on chain, so that your asset that you can potentially resell in the future, which will segue to the third use case, that is doing really well in play tests with users. So we have visibility to an awful lot of play tests that games are doing right now, where they're building on our chain, on our testnet. That's doing really well in for initial use cases. And the third one is secondary sales. So the secondary sales market right now is so high friction. to Adam, you made that point earlier of like, you might get banned, you breaking terms of service. CSGO has all these crazy stats about the amount of volume revenue that they do on their marketplace, and that is a marketplace that is not connected to the game. And CSGO is taking a 15% commission on every single trade. Like that is opportunity, and they're still grossing, north of how many digits would that be? North of 9 figures on some of these things, or sorry, 8 figures. So secondary sales is the I think people will come for those first two use cases, and people will stay for that third use case, because that third use case is the point where the economies become sustainable, where you have users able to buy something, I'm then able to cash out of my game. Oh, wow, that's an incredibly big dopamine hit, and then move on to the next game. So those are the three main use cases we see trending really, really well with, let me just clarify, not just with Web3 studios, but mostly with Web2 studios that are trying to get into Web3 and trying to basically sprinkle Web3 into their game.
Yeah, I want to
go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
On the revenue per customer and retention. We're seeing, this is my first foray into the gaming industry. What I'm hearing from my peers who are veterans is that they've never seen retention figures like what they've seen for Parrot Nation, or average revenue per customer, just like off the charts relative to what they're used to seeing. And that ownership element, I think, is a really major component, right? Like, that everything in the game is something that you own. It makes you feel something different than you would feel where you just like pop open a game and close it. It compels you to stick around a little bit longer and invest more deeply. And I think other studios are starting to see this, and they have dollar signs in their eyes. Of course, we're all here because we think there's like an amazing business opportunity. But again, like as I mentioned earlier, I think a lot of us are here because we're tinkerers. We like to work at the bleeding edge of technology, and this is a new frontier that we're all wading into together. And what we're discovering, by being on the cutting edge, is that maybe this is a really good business. And like maybe this is a new and more profitable way to build games. Maybe you don't need to go to have like tens of millions of players to have like a really significant revenue and profit set of margins, especially with, again, as you mentioned, the secondary royalties are just passive income for the company. Depending on what cut you take, you can just build new items into the game, people trade them, you just sit back and collect royalties because they're valuable in the game and because they allow you to advance your gameplay. So I do think they're starting to take note. I think the Zynga entering with Sugartown is probably, a prime example. They're bleeding edge, and so I'll be interested to see what they end up doing, and how their game progresses and what they end up building.
I think cutting edge is a great word that you mentioned. And I think that the space moves so fast, right? Everything changes quickly. I think one thing a lot of folks in the webinar might be curious about is, what are you guys seeing as far as any trends or shifts in most common gaming models and frameworks? You mentioned, Adam, earlier, you mentioned play to earn. Obviously, that was a huge deal a while ago. What different types of gaming models, or even like tokenomics, what are you seeing as kind of have a lot of heat and energy right now? Josh, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, certainly we've seen a lot of the kind of this the NFT space, but to basically put NFTs in your game, you need to be able to mint like thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions. And so, two years ago, the infra just wasn't there to do that. It was extremely hard to accomplish that and facilitate that. Companies like Immutable have changed the game on that and made that quite a bit easier. And there's other companies out there too that are working on that as well. So I think what we're seeing ultimately, to kind of like indirectly answer that question, is that, there's a lot of people hungry, a lot of companies hungry in this space. They want to reach new users, they want to reach new markets, and they're figuring out that this is the technology, but the technology has only just existed in the last couple of months to do some of this stuff. So it's like we're so early on that. So I think we're still kind of figuring out what are those best case practices. Um, I guess you could think about it. It's really comes down to offering in-game items as NFTs, or having kind of like a governance token that kind of governs the studio or the game. I'm seeing some of those examples too. Curious what the other panelists think about that.
Yeah, Adam, how about you? What are you seeing as far as like kind of energy and game frameworks and models?
I think what we're trying to build with Pirate Nation is something unique. We have like this RPG, and it also is like a CCG, and it has this like invest and express gameplay element. Uh, I think what some teams are doing is they're porting Web 2 games to Web 3, and I think that's a perfectly fine strategy. And some of them are going like this like Web 2.5 of you take the game, it's off chain, then you plop NFTs in it, and like that's a perfectly cool way to build a game. And you still get the incentive structure of like ownership, and maybe like the profit motive of like some token or other incentive design that gets brought into the game. What we're building, I think, is interesting because every time you click a button, you're earning an NFT, which means that your wallet gets like a lot of crowded. Like you have a lot of transactions in your wallet. We'll see what happens with tax season comes around. Actually, I'm like very curious to see.
No, you got to flip that positively. Your wallet will get crowded. It implies you can't close your wallet. There's so many $20 bills in there.
Everyone
It's too
wants a
crowded.
George Costanza wallet, right? Like that's what
Exactly.
everyone strives for. I don't know how many Seinfeld fans are, listening
There's
to
this
this.
the salt packet in the wallet for a Costanza. I'm with you.
Exactly. I think what we're trying to explore is like just new game models. When we first started, we are like, we're going to be Clash of Clans on chain with this and that, and now I'm not really entirely sure what we are. And we're going through this discovery process day by day. Like we're listening to the community, we're looking at the metrics. We're doing a lot of ego-driven development right now, like what's working, what's not working, versus trying to go off of like a proven strategy. And that has its pros and cons, of course. But what we've been like stumbling into over time through this product discovery process is a really unique form of game, where like the more you level up your character, the better the cards you get in the battle, the better cards you get in battle, the better loot you get, the better loot you get, the more you can level up your ship, which allows you to progress in battle. And then you get items from those battles that you can put on your island to decorate. And now people are coming to visit islands. We just launched exploration. So, when we think about our game design, our game development, we can't port it onto like another game type yet. Maybe we'll stumble towards it eventually, or maybe we're going to invent something completely new, and that's really exciting to us. And what we're seeing in the space is that other people are doing similar things. Like some of them are following a proven game model, and that's probably the safer, smarter way to develop. But again, like I mentioned, like we're a little bit, on the bleeding edge here, and or we're trying to create new things. We're trying to create a new game mode, like using this new set of technologies. We don't care enough about, sorry, we don't only want to use a new set of infrastructure. We also want to build a new game mode that wasn't necessarily possible with game Web 2. Otherwise, like, why are we here? Like, we want to just be pushing the boundaries on the game design side and also at the same time on the infrastructure side. So and partnerships with these infrastructure companies like super important to be able to do that because we can't build all this stuff on our own. Oh, you
Awesome.
got Blues games.
And no, that was great. And James, just, as we're winding down here, just briefly, James, what are some of the big kind of trends and shifts you're seeing, and kind of like most common models and frameworks right now?
I think Josh and Adam covered most of them, but the one other thing to throw out is one of the things we are super excited about over the next 6 to 12 months is because every year in gaming has this well-established history that every year there's one or two indie games that become major hits. That because Web3 has made it so easy to do the fundraising, and also the the tokenomics piece of that, where it's easier now for not only to raise capital, but also your users are getting potentially a stake in your game. That's going to be super interesting over the next year because there's inevitably going to be one, if not multiple, indie games. So not just the big guys, but some of these indie games that have one of these rocket ship moments where you just see this like game take off over a very short period of time. And by the way, that's the point where it's super important to have like the infrastructure scaling. Just like we're very happy that we're working with QuickNode to help us with scaling those things quickly overnight. That's the other thing I would really call it that like makes us really, really excited.
Awesome.
Yeah,
As we wind down here,
let me add one more
go,
one
yeah,
more
go,
point to
please
that. So,
go ahead.
I think from my perspective, I dabble just as a player in some games, mostly like real-time strategy, but like the gamer community in general is hard to please. And I think the reason is because, you invest so much time in these games.
They
You
care.
invest
People really care, for sure. Yeah.
you're invested. You've already invested time. And so, what is enabled through this Web3 blockchain experiences, especially on the governance side, and I think we're still in the very early days of this, but being able to basically, as you play this game, you get more and more points or more and more tokens to count in votes. And you're not just at the mercy of the game developers, listening to you on forums or, being very on your stream. You can literally vote for proposals in that game, get your community, get your friends in the game who are also very invested in that to join you in these proposals. And you can facilitate like this on-chain governance to make things happen and to really direct the developers of the game. That's a really powerful kind of democratic principle that I think is starting to happen, but we're still very early on that. I'm encouraged to see where that goes in the space.
I will say I'm a
Awesome.
little scared by that, like having a bunch of random people dictate the direction of your game design, who may or may not have like the best intentions of the whole ecosystem in mind, especially if you have like some whales who've accumulated a large number of whatever your governance is, who are going to make very self-serving proposals and be able to vote them
That's
through.
crypto, though, right? That's the beauty of the space.
I
There's that tension between how much is decentralized, how much
so
that's the tension. I love it.
I'm not necessarily sold on DAOs yet. Well, I'll say that. I love crypto space, but DAOs are a big question mark for me.
Adam, does that mean you're not supportive if your boat gets renamed to Bodie McBoatface?
I mean, I'm supportive of that specific change, but who knows what else, people have in mind.
Amazing, amazing. Okay, as we wind down here, I'm going to sprinkle in a quick listener question, then we'll kind of close it out. This calls back to the early in the presentation. We looked at geographic regions, and we noticed that North America, regulatory stuff, uncertainty. Someone asked, how is the SEC impacting gaming and blockchaining? Any regulatory issues? What's the impact of that?
Good question.
Can I throw like one prediction? Like I'm not a lawyer, but
Not legal advice, folks.
Yeah, not legal, not financial. Yeah, purely entertainment only. The one of the things I think is going to be very interesting is, especially on the wallet front, so where your funds are stored, the difference from a game studio's point of view about non-custodial versus custodial wallets is going to be, I think, a very large deal, especially in North America over the next 12 months. Like as each one of these countries adds the things they're thinking about actually into laws, and how they start regulating, like I think that'll be a massive difference where you'll really start to see non-custodial wallets start to become a massive advantage. And for the game studios who chose custodial wallets, like there's a significant like compliance risk there.
Cool. Anyone else on regulatory impacts environment?
I mean, being a New York-based US company is terrifying. I mean, we're just always just doing everything in our power to just be as conservative as possible and stay out of jail or out of the purview of Gary and his organization. So, I mean, no one even knows what's viable and what's not viable. And so we just try to err as much on the side of conservatism as possible, which is interesting because the community sees other companies and other projects making completely different decisions. And we want to tell them it's like, those people may go to jail, right? We don't know, but like if someone's going to jail, they're the first ones. And I'm not going to name names. I think it's clear like who is and who is like where they live on the risk spectrum. But like a lot of us just don't really want to go to jail. Like we prefer our free life, with our families. And so, they look around and, like the community and the space, are like, oh, well, they're doing that. They're doing that. Like you should do that. Like, well, we've spoken to council about this and it's like extremely clear. Like that's not even like a yellow line. Like that's like a way over the red line and you shouldn't do that. So we know what we can't do for sure, but we still don't have a lot of guidance about what we can do, which means that you have to make a lot of interpretations and a lot of judgment calls and just like risk-based decisions, which is really tricky. We need clear regulations about what isn't allowed. Otherwise, we're just going to continue to enrich lawyers and just like live in fear. Like did we break a rule? Like, we don't know. So we at the company at least try to be as much on the up and up as possible, given the uncertainty.
Last two questions, and we'll call it a wrap. And let's do this lightning style here. First off, I'm not sure in this last 2 years you're legally allowed to have a webinar without mentioning AI in some way. Any way you guys are seeing AI have an impact on the space, whether it's our game is being coded faster, our developers making a feature in games, or is it like, if the answer is actually no, it's not really part of this mix, and thank you very much, we don't want your hype. Where does AI fit in the mix here?
Yeah, good question. I'll take that one first. So I think there's a lot of interest around it, but I've seen AI trading bots to date. But where does this go? I mean, if you think about it, like most of the world's economy is more or less offline. Like if you're doing ACH, transfers from one checking account to another in the business world today, at the end of the day, there's some Briggs truck carrying cash around from banks to banks or using the Federal Reserve to kind of transfer money around. Like it's very much of a cash, like moving from bank to bank. And so if you think about it, like for AI to work, like it needs like an online on-chain economy to kind of power that. And I think that's still many years away, but that is where we're heading. So too early to say, but I think that could be one of the aha moments for crypto and for the Web3 ecosystem.
And James, Adam, any thoughts on AI in games in particular? Are you seeing any kind of interplay between those two things?
I mean, I see
It's
Prime using it in a bunch of other companies. We are not using it currently in our game stack, but we use it a lot in just streamlining company efficiency, like writing, coming up with
Yeah.
proposals, like coming up with names for things. Like we use it in our game design lore pieces, but we're not using it yet in game development. And we also use it to prototype different ideas on the art pipeline before we go into like and actually paint it out.
Got it. James?
yeah, the thing where it's still early on this, but like we're starting to see really concrete signs is, the saying with like making a video game why it's hard is you're essentially creating an app and you're also creating a movie at the same time. And like that's a shitload of work and they have to integrate nicely together. The creating the 3D assets is the long pull, especially in terms of like the movie side of that business. So that generally is the main driver for why a video game takes minimum like 12 to, or normally minimum 18 months to make. If that cycle time to produce a video game comes down from 12 or 18 months to something much shorter, the speed that you're going to see video games iterating on things will will consequently get faster, right? Like it's like essentially reducing the cycle time on like the Darwinian evolution of video games. I think that'll be the biggest the biggest impact is you're going from a bacteria that replicates every, sorry, not to call video games bacteria, but the going from a bacteria that like replicates once every year and a half to possibly something that replicates every 2 or 3 months, and
Awesome.
that will really speed things up.
What a better way to end things than on bacteria of of games and AI. Love it. Guys, this has been an awesome conversation. Really enjoy it. Thanks so much again. Thanks for all our listeners. Enjoyed it and take care. Appreciate it.